Hello, folks. Hey, this week, a lot of you are probably traveling. It is a holiday week when this particular episode is coming out. We're doing some traveling too, so we're going to do something that was actually pretty popular a few weeks back when we were traveling. And instead of just skipping a day or skipping a week of releasing a podcast episode, we're going to give you one of our favorites and one that has been really, really popular over time. And this week, we're going to go back and play again probably the one thing we get asked about more than anything else is triggers. And so today, we're going to be talking about everything having to deal with triggers. If you missed this one from a while back, we hope that you'll stay tuned and listen. If you listened to it back then, listen again. Everybody needs a refresher, so stay tuned. We're going to be talking about triggers. We get asked about triggers all the time. And triggers, specifically what we will be talking about are those painful memories and thoughts that jump back into your head from some painful marriage experience, obviously. And, you know, anything can trigger that. It can be triggered by any of your five senses. And so, you know, it could be something that you smell, that you taste, you know, something you see, all the five senses. So, and don't laugh at me. I didn't forget them this time. I was just like, just, you know, why am I? The people out there are intelligent.
That's right. We don't have to name them all.
We don't have to name the five senses for you. You got it. And there's people right now they're literally listening to us and they're going
counting
taste, smell, you know,
sight.
They're trying to
Taste, smell, sight. Now I can't get them. Hearing, taste, smell, sight, hearing, and touch. Got it. Go.
Okay. So, So, you know, for us, if you don't know our story, we walked through infidelity 12 years ago when Heather confessed to being unfaithful in our marriage. And so, you know, we really do know firsthand the pain that triggers and how consuming they can be. And, you know, especially for me, being the one that was betrayed, and I dealt with triggers for quite a while. But, you know, as we were talking about it earlier, it doesn't have to be something as big as infidelity or, you know, it could be any sort of painful experience from your marriage. So you don't have to shut this off if you're like, well, we've never had it. Because more than likely, no matter who you are, if you didn't know it was a trigger, now you do. Like you're thinking and you're like, oh, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, that's a painful memory when I see that, or, you know, when I hear that song, or, I mean, it could be anything.
And it can be like for a disappointing season in your marriage, or something your spouse did to let you down. Like, you know, even, you know, I'm just thinking about like if we had a bad fight and we, you know, we're at a certain restaurant. Well, going back to that restaurant triggers even just that. So we're not talking about just infidelity. And then I also want to say, you know, of course you had so many more triggers than I did, but in that I have triggers that bring up shame and guilt on my side too. So this is really for everybody.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to go there at some point during this discussion and let you kind of share, because it's obvious that when, you know, the people that are asking us, you know, questions about it, you know, they're the ones typically that have been betrayed. Right. And these things keep coming up and popping into their head. So like, you know, for me, it was, I would see a certain color truck driving around. I could pass certain places where, you know, I knew that some things had happened because of some things that you confessed to me.
Right.
You know, just, you know, even, you know, places where, you know, maybe I found out about something or where we were, you know, just all kinds of stuff. I mean, the counseling office that we went to, I literally drive by it every single day on my way to work. So there's all kinds of things that you could be thinking about and that could trigger. And it can even be like little small things. You know, we were doing marriage coaching just in the last couple of weeks, and we were actually talking about this topic. and you said something, and whatever word you said was an actual trigger for me 12 years later. And I was able to tell them, kind of in real time, look, I know what you're talking about, because as silly as this sounds, when she said that word, it triggered this because I started thinking about this, and then it led to this. And so it is a real thing. And the questions,
it's painful.
It's
painful.
And the questions that we get are, how do you deal with it? How do you get them to stop? But how do you deal with them? And then the spouse that was the betrayer, they also want to know, how do I help? When that happens, what do I do? And then people want to know, are they going to ever stop?
Right.
Like, when does this end? And so there's all sorts of questions surrounding this. And so we just want to kind of talk about it for a few minutes, maybe give you some pointers, some suggestions, some ways that you can fight this, and hopefully it'll make things a little bit better for you.
That's right. So when we talk about triggers, I feel like there is such a broad range for this discussion, because it doesn't just happen to one person. It happens to both. And then not only that, but you have what you just said, how do I help my spouse through these? And then you also have the element of the fact that I know you were just triggered hurts me because I know I caused that, so there's so many layers of this topic that we could get into. So what's the first one?
Okay, well, let me kind of answer a couple of questions. All right, so first of all, triggers are very, very normal.
Right.
And when the pain or the betrayal or whatever has happened to cause that, obviously the sooner, the closer it is to when it's happened, the more those triggers are going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
and probably more intense.
Right. So more frequent and more intense. And so I am telling you that time does help.
Sure.
However, I'm also telling you, I'm being very honest with you, that 12 years later, there are still triggers that happen. Now, it may be once a week. It may be once a month. But back when everything had just come out, I mean, these triggers were literally happening every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm just speaking to that person that's dealing with it, and I'm saying, I get it. I understand. Yes, time does help, but you also have to be kind of proactive in how you fight it.
Right.
And so I'm going to give some things that I did and some things that I've learned through the years. And one of those is this. This seems very simple, but if there's a way to eliminate or remove any of the triggers, then by all means do that.
Right.
And it could be as small as, okay, I've got a different route that I can drive to drop the kids off at school so that I don't have to pass by that, or I don't have to think about that, or I don't have to see that building, or I don't have to see that person, or whatever it is.
Eliminate it.
Eliminate it. Just, hey, I don't want that trigger to happen over and over and over. So for us, that was the case, because one of the places that I would drive on the way to just about anywhere on the opposite side of town, like, because you had told me some stuff that had happened, it was a trigger for me almost every time. And so for the longest time, I didn't even want to go that way. Like, I would drive a completely different direction just so I wouldn't have to go down that route. And, we even made like big changes too. Like, we changed our church.
Right.
Because every time I stepped foot in the church, it was a massive trigger. And there were lots of other issues there, lots of other things. But I'm just, that's one of the big ones. We've probably said this before on here, but I can't stand the beach. And I didn't really like it beforehand, but, it's a trigger for me too. And so I just as soon not go, because why?
Me going to the gym.
100%. Yes. That's a great
Yep.
one.
Yep. And that doesn't mean I had to give up the gym. It just means that I had to find something different. And I think we've talked about that recently. I choose to go to BARRE, BARRE,
Not the bar.
not the bar. And it's all ladies, and I love it. And that is something, and I don't know that I would have enjoyed it before, but I really think that God's just honoring the fact that I am doing something that you're comfortable with and still choosing to move my body, and He's given me a love for it. So,
Yeah, and I mean, like I'm telling you, there's so many things I can't even address them all. But like during that season of your life, like there was even like certain television shows that you were watching, and those, when I see those, they create triggers.
sure.
And even to this day, but I would never watch one of those shows because why? Eliminate it if you can. So that's kind of my first thing. Now I totally understand that there's some that can't be eliminated.
Right.
And so we're going to address that a little bit towards the end, and also really even moving beyond just avoiding them. There is a way to just take it a step further instead of just avoiding those triggers. But I think early and initial steps, that's something major. Just any way that you can, eliminate it. Now, here's one of the things that I discovered throughout, learning how to deal with triggers. Triggers actually cause an internal response and they cause an external response. And obviously, this internal response is, you're feeling this trigger, everything's happening on the inside, and what are you going to do about it? How are you going to handle it? How are you going to try to, get it out of your mind? I mean, whatever to remove it. That's all something that's internal that you need to deal with internally. And the thing that you have to remember is that Satan, he's putting those thoughts there, wanting you to dwell on it and wanting you to sit inside this internal struggle that you're having that brings up all these memories. And even if you're doing so great with your spouse and your spouse is doing so great and doing everything that they're supposed to do, those triggers are still going to happen. And I can promise you it's going to happen because it still happens 12 years later.
That's right.
And there's no there's no reason. Like I hold nothing, there's nothing that I hold over your head. I'm not angry. We've, total forgiveness, all of that. But Satan still wants to remind me.
Yeah.
And so he's bringing that up, and internally, I've got to figure out every time, how am I going to handle that?
That's right. Because he's not going to give up on you. I mean, that's not in his nature. Like he's going to always want to be after you. So he's going to continue to remind you of things. And it's just taking things captive, your thoughts captive again and again and again. And it keeps you in a knowing that you have a need for Christ. And that's what I love, is that anytime I see something or hear about something that is keeping somebody not constantly, but things that just won't go away, or something you think about a lot, it's like, okay, that's a sweet reminder that you can't do it by yourself, that you have a need for Christ. And if you could do it alone, you wouldn't have a need for Him. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it's a part of the recovery. And yes, it's a consequence for for my sin. But in those consequences, we have a God who is kind enough to, even in the consequences, use it as an opportunity to draw nearer to Him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that when those things happen, the internal response where you need to start moving towards, so you've already started trying to eliminate things and do your best to avoid triggers, but they're still going to happen. So then when they happen, your internal response needs to be just like what you said. You take those thoughts captive. And where I want to encourage you is to just start shifting your mindset and start shifting it towards I am thankful that we're not there
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was how it really started improving for me, because I started, something would trigger, and instead of just going down in the pit and dwelling on it and making my mind run wild and thinking of, what other questions I had, what else do I not know? Instead, I just would always shift it, almost fighting back with the enemy and just going, oh no, I am so thankful that we're working on our marriage. Our marriage is better. We're not in this dark place that we were. And it really just became, that was the internal struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's more of, you get to give gratitude back.
Yeah. And when like if you just know that the reality is there's gonna be triggers.
Sure.
And then you don't just get
Like, there's
ticked off
nothing wrong with you because you're having triggers.
Right. And when you know it's gonna happen, then you can fight it a little bit better than if it's just like, oh no, here we go, and we're gonna just go into the pit. So
Yeah.
so
And that's a mentality too of not feeling like I shouldn't say the victim, not the woe is me. Like you could very easily go into the woe is me of, you know, it happened.
And if you want to get stuck there and just do that
Yeah.
for the rest of your life,
That's
then
right.
let the triggers just keep affecting you
right.
that
And
way.
you get stuck, and that's exactly what the enemy wants.
Yeah.
Is for you to get stuck there.
So there's also this external response, because when it happens, you're fighting on the inside, but obviously you're outward. Something outside happens where you're either going to get really sad, maybe you're going to cry, maybe you're going to have a panic attack, maybe you're going to get angry. Most people, I'll tell you, just shut down and get really, really quiet because they don't know what to do or how to handle it. And the internal process is going on. And so the outside is just, it's kind of this freeze. It's just a freeze. And so the spouse that has hurt you, they want to know, well, what do I do? How do I even begin to fight this? So you may have some kind of response on what you did.
Well, I can just remember that at first, when I would know that something was happening, I might see that same color truck, or we might be driving by the same place that I knew was triggering for you. I think I'll just go ahead and tell my mistake that I made from the very beginning was saying, how can I help? Like, don't let that trigger you, because I was trying to fix it.
Yeah.
I was trying to fix it instead of just allowing you to process through that. And so I can admit it took some counsel to me, to know that it's okay for you to process through that, and I don't have to try to fix it. But my role is to come alongside you. And I can't tell you guys how many times I just said, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm sorry that you're having to even think about it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry that I
Relive
caused
the pain.
this. Yeah. I'm sorry. Instead of, you definitely don't want to have your eyes on yourself going, oh my gosh, when are you going to get over this?
Yeah.
And I don't think I know I didn't say that.
But you probably wanted to.
Sure.
some.
Like as the time went on, yes, it was like, oh my gosh, are we really going back there? But I definitely wouldn't voice it. And it was a reminder again that I caused that. And when I would remind myself of that, I could quickly get to, okay, what is my role in this? And my role is to encourage you and to tell you how, that I'm sorry and that I'm there if you need anything.
Yeah.
And not, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're still doing this, or anger. And definitely another thing is not to try to get your eyes on me.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm the one that, no, it's not
Right.
about me.
Well,
To just allow you to process through that well.
Well, there has to be an external response from both of you, and it needs to be done correctly in a healthy way. And so I know for us, I would definitely just shut down because I was scared of what my external reaction could be, and I didn't want to hurt you. I mean, that was not my role. And so I knew it was just better to just not say anything. And you would typically say, "Hey, what's wrong?" Mm-hmm. And instead of me going, "Nothing," I mean, come on, what good does that do? So I was always I would try to be honest, and I would just say, I just, something just triggered a thought. And you, like, I think the worst thing that you could have done, and I don't think you did this, but would be to say, what was it? Instead, it was just like you said, you were like, I'm so sorry. And, if you, I'm going to give you time. And if you need me or need to talk to me about it, I'm here. And like,
at the
that's
beginning,
it.
and at the beginning, you would ask some questions or clarify something until you felt like that was enough of that, and you got your questions answered,
Right.
and then you would move on. But let's not jump over the fact that it took a ton of self-control to not get angry every single time.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Because we could have had lots of fights.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't, because you're the one leading this discussion, you're not going to brag on yourself. But that was a big part of us being able to process well through these triggers, was you didn't attack me every time you got a trigger. And, we're talking about my part in that I didn't, what's wrong? But for you to not be, because you could have easily said, oh, did you just see that? And been so hateful and ugly towards me. But instead, you controlled your tongue, which is a big part of why we were able to process it, walk through that early parts of triggers well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the kind of the last thing that I want to roll into a little bit is just the deeper healing of triggers. Again, these are going to take place over time, and there's no timetable. Like, I don't have a manual that I can give you and say, oh, by 6 months you should stop. It just doesn't work that way. But I would say that, within that first year, there's going to be just tons of triggers, because everything is sort of an anniversary. And we talked about anniversaries a couple of weeks ago. But those things are going to happen. But after that, you should begin, for sure. And some, gosh, I hope those triggers end really quickly for everybody. And I hope you get a handle on it. But don't be alarmed if it doesn't happen that way. But as time goes on, like, those things, they need to be less and less, and they need to be less intense, because you're fighting them and you're dealing with it.
Right.
And, the verse, resist the devil and he flees from you. And that's the same here. Those things are going to pop up, but the more you resist them and reject them, then you're not going to think about them as much, because the enemy's not going to attack you. But as you're moving through this, there's also some deeper healing moments. And that is to actually, the things that are triggering, you can do things intentionally to redeem those things. So maybe it's a place. And, I've heard people, talk about restaurants, where maybe something went on with their spouse and somebody else. And, they wanted to make the decision to go and redeem that place. And by that, I mean, you go and you intentionally create a new memory with your spouse, so that, and it may be that you never go there again, but it's almost just like, Satan, I'm going to punch you right in the gut for this,
And my last memory of that place is going to be a good one, and not something that was wrong.
Yes. And again, that may be the last time you do that. But, I jokingly talk about the beach, because I'm not a big fan of I wasn't a fan of it anyway. But even after 12 years ago, I had an opportunity to go to the beach when I was at a conference, And so, I remember one night going and walking on the beach all by myself and just enjoying the moon and the stars and just praying over our marriage. And it did just so much for me and healing. And again, and we've been to the beach a couple of times, like on cruises and things like that, where we've been together. And honestly, I don't remember if there were triggers when we did that. And part of it is because, I was able to do some deep healing and redeem, those places. And, we've tried to do that with other areas and in other things as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's an important step in the process, is being able to have a positive experience and redeem some of those moments or places that you have triggers with.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so we covered a lot of stuff. And I know that we didn't answer all the questions, but I hope that we gave you some tools, maybe just some information on how to fight those triggers. And look, seriously, we talk about this almost in one of our coaching sessions. That's part of what we talk about. So, if you're interested in just diving in a little bit more, let us know. And and again, reach out to us, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So send us an email or reach out on social media. But we know it's a real thing, and so we want to be very sensitive to that. But we also want you to defeat this.
That's right.
We want you to move beyond it so that these triggers are not constantly affecting you and your spouse and your marriage, because there's definitely a way to fight it. And hopefully you're now armed with some good ammunition of how you can fight this.
Yep.
So, all right. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you next week.